What we're going to look at today are smart objects. Smart objects are a great tool, a great style of layer that we can learn about and use a lot in Photoshop. And getting to know them a little bit better will definitely help us with our workflow and creating things in Photoshop in general. And we actually went up here before and we saw all the different types of layer types that you can have in Photoshop. And the last one here is a smart object, and just they can do a lot of different things. So I'm just going to show you a few different things they can do. So the first thing they can do is you can group many layers into a smart object. Let's try that out right now. I'm going to go to my portfolio, and in my portfolio layer I have these boxes here, and they're clipping masks. If I click on the group there, I should have labeled it properly. Either way, these are all clipping masks, and I place them here, and that's great. Now what I want to do is, for whatever reason, this is me just to show you, but maybe you want to do this in your workflow too, I'm going to convert all these into a smart object. So all of these are going to be put into a smart object, and the way we convert anything into a smart object is we just right click on it. Now I'm actually right-clicking on the group, or I could right-click on individual layers. It doesn't really matter. But for this situation, I'm right-clicking on the group and convert to smart object. Now everything is a smart object, and you can tell it's a smart object by looking at that icon and knowing that icon is a smart object. And that's it. Now if you just shut this on and off, you're actually shutting off that whole entire smart object. But you're asking, well, where did all those images go in the clipping masks? I need those back. I want to edit them, and you can't really do that here because they're in one object. Very simple. That's all you do is when you double click on the smart object, and I'm also going to open up my properties panel. If I double click on the smart object or edit contents, and there's a few others, convert to linked and convert to layers, which I'm not going to do just yet, I can edit the contents, or like I said, just double click and watch what happens. A new document is going to open up right here, group1.psp. So remember the name of the grouped layer, and here's everything as is, as normal, exactly as I saw it before. And what I could do here, let's even pretend I wanted to move this one around. Let me just increase the size of that really quickly, just so we can see the difference. And I'll say, you know what, that's the change I wanted to make inside my layers here. I'm going to save it, Command S or File, and save, because it is its own smart object. And now I can just close it. I don't have to save it anywhere special. I don't have to do anything other than saving it and closing it. And that's it. And now it has changed here. So anything you change in the smart object and that new document you made, save it, close it, and those changes will appear here in this instance. So if you have many instances of this particular one, but this goes for any smart object, it will change it all around. So if you have a red circle here and it's a smart object and you put that red circle everywhere around, it will change for you once you change that smart object even just once or as many times as you want. So a great thing about smart objects, they really help you organize a lot of different file types, a lot of different layers. You can put them into one smart object, double click, and it opens up a new file, a new document. So that's one great way to use smart objects. The next is a very important one too. I'm going to create a new document, Command N, and file new, and I'm just going to make it 1080 by 1080 just to give you some kind of reference. 72 pixels print, because let's just pretend it's for the web. And RGB, I should start off all my Photoshop any Photoshop document in RGB. If I use RGB, it gives me access to everything in Photoshop. If I go to CMYK, it'll actually gray some things out that I can't use. So I always work in RGB no matter what, and then convert to CMYK later if I have to. Now, if I'm just doing something really quickly, I'll keep it in CMYK, know it's for print, and then I'll do that. If not, always keep it in RGB. Okay, I'm just going to create, and there it is. So what I've done here, I've actually found a photo that my friend took, a great food photographer, Nicole Zalba, and I just found it on Pinterest. So this is the quality of a Pinterest picture. So all I'm going to do is click and drag and bring it into the new document, hold it, and then let go of the click, or I can just click on here, get rid of the lock, copy it, Command C, and then Command V and bring it in. It doesn't matter, either way works. So here it is, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a couple different, or the different idea that smart objects actually have on individual images. What you should do no matter what moving forward with your objects, with any picture you bring in, any pixel image you bring in, you should automatically convert to a smart object the second you bring it in, and I'll show you why. So I have this one at the top here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to convert it to a smart object. I'm just going to right click and convert to smart object. Now I know that this layer is just your normal average pixel layer, and I have a smart object. So this one has the icon, which shows me it's a smart filter. This does not, which just says it's a pixel layer, not a problem. So I'm gonna zoom in and I'm gonna see, yes, the quality of both of these is the exact same. They look great, not a problem. And now I'm gonna zoom out, and what I'm gonna do, we know that I'm gonna grab both of these, select both layers, and Command T or Edit Free Transform. And what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna shrink them down. And as I shrink them down, we know that we can shrink down pixels. That's not a problem. And I'm going to press Enter. And I'm going to Command T again, and I'm going to enlarge them. Now we know that we should never enlarge pixels, because what Photoshop wants to do is interpolate, figure out, okay, you made them really small and you left me that many pixels. Now, when you enlarged it, I have to figure out, or Photoshop has to figure out, how do I make this work? You're enlarging all these pixels that I don't have all that information. I'll press Enter, and then I'm going to bring it back down again. And you might be doing this in your workflow. You might find yourself making a picture smaller and larger, smaller, larger, just trying to figure it out. And in the end, I just did this a few times, just shrink it back down again, really small. And one more time, bring it back up. Now look at the difference here. All right, we can see a major difference in the quality. Now the smart object, obviously, looks great. The pixel layer does not. Let me shrink both of these down so you get a better look. Now we can see the difference. So what a smart object does, actually, it keeps and retains all the digital information that the picture initially had. And then when you stretch it up and stretch it down, or enlarge it and scale it down, it will still retain all that original data it had. Where here, this was not a smart object, it was just a pixel layer. It did not remember all that initial information. It just played around with the small pixels that were shrunk, and then tried to enlarge it and tried to figure out how I'm gonna make it bigger, and obviously get pixelated and blurry. So the ideal thing to do is anytime you bring a raster image or picture, any type of picture into Photoshop, convert it to an object right away. That way you can play with it many different ways and not lose any quality, which is very, very important. Now, another way to do this not only is with the raster graphics, but also vectors. So I'm in here in Illustrator. I've created this logo. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm just going to shut these off for now, and I'm going to paste it in. Now, what does it ask me right away? I Command C and I Command V. I pasted it in. It says, how do you want to bring it in? Do you want to paste it in as a smart object, pixel, path, or shape layer? I want to bring it in as a smart object, and do not add it to my current library. I don't need to do that. I'm just going to say OK, and there it is. It looks great, and it's a smart object. Very good. I'm going to duplicate this now, and this time, in order to get something out of being a smart object and back to a pixel layer, I'm just going to right-click on it and rasterize layer. Now we know that they're rasters in general, of course, because we're working in Photoshop, but that's just the term it uses to make something that's a smart object back into a pixel layer. So I know that this one is a normal pixel layer and this one is a smart object. So now what I could do, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with those two pictures. I'm going to bring them up, press Enter, and we already see an issue, right? I'm going to grab them again, bring them down, press Enter, set it, bring it back up again. And now we know also that even though it looks really bad right now, I'm still in transform mode. So don't let this be the gauge where you think, oh, everything looks really bad. No, just press Enter, let go of the transform, and then you'll see. So we see that even with smart object and a vector-based image, that obviously that works as well too. So it's definitely an idea to bring in your vector images as smart objects as well, because this is the kind of quality we're looking at. Next, what I want to do is show you what happens when I do double click on a vector object this time. I'm just going to throw this one out. I don't need it. It looks horrible. Now this is a smart object. Now when I clicked on a photo, a raster image that was a smart object, I double click and it opens in its own document. Well, what happens when I brought in a vector and I made it a smart object? Well, let's watch. I double click on the vector and it opens it up in Illustrator. And now I just have to wait for it to open, and then I'm just going to have to find it because it does place it maybe somewhere a little bit different. We'll see how that goes. And there it is. I have my vector graphic in Illustrator. And let's even pretend for now, I'm going to grab all the green and I'm going to change all the green to a different color just because. Okay, there it is. There's my new logo, let's say, my new color scheme. I don't have to do anything else, once again, other than just save it and close it. VectorSmartObject.ai. I could save this as somewhere else if I wanted to, in another file. I could save it on my desktop, whatever. I'm not going to, because Photoshop is going to remember the information. I'm just going to Command S or File Save and Command W and close it. Done. It's closed. Now, when I came back into Photoshop, it automatically changes. So once again, speaking to what I just mentioned before, if I had potentially a website and I had a logo up here and there's a logo here and there's a logo down here, I'm just duplicating it by holding down Option. I could also duplicate it up here, Command J, many different ways to duplicate objects. And if I click on even just one of them, there it is. I'm going to select all just the purples and I'm going to make this particular color red, and I'll save it, Command S, and I'll close it, Command W. And now it changes all the instances of that smart object, which is a great way to work with smart objects in general. So a very useful way to play with that. Another great thing here, I'm just going to get rid of these, is with smart objects, you get smart filters. Now let's look at this. I have two objects again. One, I'm going to make it not a smart object, convert it back to a pixel layer by saying rasterize a layer. So once I have a smart object here, let me bring that up top to match the layer organization. And I have this one here, which is a normal pixel layer, just made of pixels, not a problem. They both look great right now. Nothing's changed in terms of enlarging or anything. But now let's look at something that we can do. We could actually create some filters on these. Normally when I have a pixel layer and I want to put a filter on it, I go to filter, and let's just put a Gaussian blur on it. I'll click on that, and there I go. And now what I can do, I can play around, whatever I want to do. I'll just say, leave it at that for now. Okay. And that's it. That's kind of a destructive way to work with Photoshop, and we always want to do something non-destructive, meaning something we can go back and re-edit if we ever had to. We don't have to start all over from scratch again, which is ideal. We definitely want to do more non-destructive ways of editing in Photoshop. So now I have my smart object. Well, what happens if I do the same thing? Now, number one, if I go here to filter, I'll notice some things are grayed out that I cannot do. Only a few things that are not smart filters. So I'm going to do the exact same thing to blur. I'm going to go to Gaussian blur, and I'll say the exact same thing, say okay, but look what happens over here. This little area opens up for, under that smart object. It's called a smart filter. I could shut it off, I could turn it back on. I could shut out the filter exactly, or I could double click on it and re-edit that filter. That's a smart filter. If I say, you know what, that's too much, I don't even want it right now, or I want to bring it back later, or I want to change it later. Now all of these that are set up, that are actually not grayed out, but that are black, you can change, and you could use as smart filters. And there's I'm gonna get rid of my Gaussian blur, but I'll keep my filter gallery, whichever one I chose there, which let's even just go to film grain, or I don't know, cutout. This one doesn't work so well because it is a vector, so you're not going to see much of it anyways. And there we go. So I could shut that off, turn it back on. So smart filters are a great way to work with, are a great point of using smart objects. So you can always go back and re-edit a non-destructive way to play with that, which is really important. Now there is one thing that smart objects can't do, and that's some of the editing tools cannot directly affect a smart object. So some of these right here, like I mentioned, some of the filtered ones that are grayed out, you just can't use, which is not a problem. But we do have this where if I want to click on here and say, you know what, I want to do some work with my burn tool or dodge or sponge, or if I want to work with one of these, the blur, sharpen or smudge, or if I want to erase, or if I want to do content aware or clone stamp, or any of these, I cannot use these. So if I click on something like here, I'll just say burn tool, and I click, obviously already my cursor is saying no, I click, it says smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Edit content will no longer be available. Rasterize a smart object, do you want to, yes or no? Cancel. Now, that's not to say I can't actually do that. So in here, because it's a vector, that doesn't necessarily work. But let me shut these ones off and I'll show you what I mean. So here, once again, I want to maybe edit here, I want to do a little burning, it won't let me do it. That's okay. So what it says instead, it says, you know, do you want to rasterize it? No, I don't want to rasterize it. But what I can do is double click on the smart object, and here, because this is a pixel layer, I can now burn something here, make that a little darker, great. I'll save it, Command S, Command W to close it, and now it's darker. So you're still able to use these tools, but you have to do it in the smart object. So that's still, once again, you still have access to everything, even with smart objects, even the things that kind of don't allow you to do something, you're still able to do it, but you just have to do it in the smart object. So a lot of great ways to use smart objects. We should be using them a lot more in all of our assignments, and just generally in Photoshop. They give you so many non-destructive ways to work with Photoshop, so you can go back a month, 5 years, 10 years later, and go back and re-edit some of your images or whatever layouts or compositions you've made, and still have all these non-destructive ways to do it, just as if you just worked on it an hour ago. So great idea to use smart objects. Now, if I want to, I could actually use this one here to convert to layers. So just like in here, if I had all these, my smart object, I can convert it back to the original layers that I had. So I'll convert to layers, and now they've come back. So it's no longer a smart object, but now it is back to its layers. But once again, if I want, right click, convert to smart object, and it's a smart object again, or say, you know what, I want to bring all those layers back into this document, convert to layers, and I'm converted back to layers. Now, the way that I can convert to linked, what that allows me to do is to, like we embed or link graphics, what this does, I could actually link that particular object, which saves file size, or as normally, if you bring anything into Photoshop, it's automatically embedded. So I can actually convert this to a linked image and not an embedded image. I'll click on that. It says, where do you want to save it? I'll just save it as the logo. And it saves it as automatically as a .psb file, which is totally fine. Save it on my desktop. And there it is. And now I could either re-embed it, bring it back as an embedded image, or I can keep it linked. Now we know the benefit of having linked images is so that now my Photoshop file isn't huge, massive, and especially if I have a ton of different images on there that I can't work with it so quickly. Photoshop actually has a lag to it. It takes a little bit of time. But if I have a few images, obviously embedding your images is not a problem. But being able to link your images as well is always a great way to use Photoshop, so it's not, the file size isn't as large. So it's always nice to do that. But if I want to, I can embed it again, and now it's embedded, and I don't rely on that link. But remember, with linked images, you have to make sure they're properly organized in an organized file, folder, structure, or else Photoshop is going to want to know where is that link, what you do with it, what happened, and you'll need to relink those images.